Well, welcome out to another Wednesday night. I'm glad to see you guys. I was just talking with somebody this week about how the assembly, that midweek assembly, I need it. It's good to see you, and it really helps pick me up, and it helps me get through the week. And when I'm having a bad week, it helps me get through the week when I'm having a good week. And it's good to see you this evening. I've given probably three sermons on the heart. And I think I had mentioned that last time I preached on this was a Sunday morning about a month ago. I talked on purity of heart, and I said that this was part one of a two-part sermon. And the second part of that sermon, I said that I was asked when I went to hold my gospel meeting in Oklahoma to preach on the subject of pornography. And so I took that original sermon, which was one, and I split it in half. I gave that first part, purity of heart, and tonight I want to talk about pornography in the heart. And this is not a subject that people like to talk about a lot. I won't say that I just enjoy talking about it, but I do think it's very important, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But as a review, because this was originally a two-part sermon, I want to review what we studied last time because they do go together. I talked about what purity was, and purity simply means to be clean or uncontaminated. And I gave you the visual in your mind of a fresh snow. You can't see anything. It's just a flat white and no blemishes. In Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18, the writer, God, is the speaker, and he talks about how our sins are purified, they're clean, where our slate is made uncontaminated once again by the forgiveness of God. It says, though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow, and though they're like red like crimson, they'll be as wool, which is white. And so that's what purity means. When we're talking about being pure or being purified, we're talking about cleansing more than just our outside, our exterior, what Jesus calls in Matthew 28 our cup, the cup represented in that teaching the person's whole self. And a lot of times people clean the outside, what everybody can see, but on the inside, purification is starting there and starting from the inside out. So he says in Matthew 23, verse 28 to the Pharisees, even so you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. And so to be clean, to be truly pure, means to have an inside that's pure and that feeds all the way to the exterior that everybody can see. It's not just a show. Purity begins in the heart, we talked about. And I gave you several scriptures. I just want to review some of those scriptures because a lot of these scriptures provide the foundation for some of the more scientific, philosophical things I'm going to talk about, which are scriptural, but these scriptures help kind of expound what I'm saying. In Psalm 24, verse 3, the Bible says, who may ascend into the hill of the Lord, or who may stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. The hands there representing the outside, the things we do, and the heart representing the inside, pure, clean. Psalm 51, verse 7, David, after his sin with Bathsheba, said, purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Purity begins in the heart. A couple more passages. Jeremiah 4 says, O Jerusalem, wash your heart from wickedness that you may be saved. How long shall your evil thoughts lodge within you? And then in 2 Timothy 2:22, Paul tells Timothy, flee also youthful lusts, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace, and those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. So I think that more than gets the point across that purity is a cleanness from the inside out. It must begin in the heart, or it's not going to, I believe, from the indication of Scripture, be wholesome. It'll only be partial. And only by the help of God will it in any way be wholesome, but that's where it's got to begin. So in this sermon, I want to take the principles that we studied there and the principles from these passages, and I want to apply it to the subject of pornography. And after all, lust is something that begins and is maintained in the heart. And so that's a good place to talk about this subject. When we're talking about pornography, we're talking about lust of the heart. And so somebody might ask the question, well, Aaron, why do you feel the need to talk about this tonight and put us through this? Well, let me share with you several reasons why. Some of you guys, you've never heard me give a whole lesson on this. Some of you have. And for both audiences, I'll explain to you some of the reasons why I think this is important on a Wednesday night in the middle of April. Pornography, like I just said, is a sin of the heart, and so I was doing this series, and I thought, well, let's just continue the series. But more importantly, statistically speaking, in a church with 130 members, and on there, the lower number is 135. I think there's probably 130 members here. We have visitors from time to time that make it sometimes a crowd larger than that. But statistically speaking, in a church that size, it's minimal that there would be at least 2 men and 1 woman in this audience who, in some capacity throughout the year, have looked at pornography. And I'm going to share those statistics with you in just a minute to prove that to you. Right now, you don't believe me, probably, especially about the female part. But this is, statistically, that would be very, very conservative. Pornography is an extremely shame-inducing, guilt-laden, secretive, and highly destructive sin. It can destroy intimacy. It can destroy Christian joy, the assurance that we're saved, the hope of salvation. It can destroy the intimacy between a child and their parents, between a husband and their spouse, or vice versa, and between our relationship with God, our intimacy with God. It is highly destructive. And it maintains its destructiveness because it's so secret. In almost the 7 years that I've been here, I've almost been here 7 years in July, I've had multiple men from this congregation, I won't say who, I won't say how many, it doesn't really matter, that have told me that they either in the past had problems with pornography, or they in that moment that they told me were actively having problems with it, and they were asking for help. And it occurred to me that I gave a sermon in 2021 called The Immoral Woman. Some of y'all may remember that. It might be scarred in your brain. And after that was after that sermon. Before that sermon, no one ever came to me and talked to me about that. But that was also the first time that I ever disclosed to any public audience that I myself had a problem with pornography from a very young age. And after that, that's when men started coming to me and sharing with me their problem. And I find that people going through that sin cycle, like I've been through, they appreciate this a lot more than people who have never been through it. When I talk to people who have never dealt with this problem, a lot of times it's like you can just see it in their eyes talking to them, and it's just not registering with them the importance of talking about this. But for those that have a sermon, a place like this to talk about it with compassion and with confession, it's very powerful. Not to say that my particular sermon will be powerful, but just the very idea of this, I think, is important and powerful. And over the last 5 years, I mentioned I've been here for 7 years, but in the last 5 years particularly, because that was how long it's been since I gave that original sermon, I've had literally dozens of men from other congregations and the wives of husbands from other congregations and outside the church email me through my website, call me on the phone, text me, tell me in group chats that they've dealt with this problem. And you don't probably, if you're not having in those conversations, you're not in a place managing a website like I do, you probably don't realize just how prevalent it is in the church. No doubt in my mind, there's somebody here that I don't know about that's looking at pornography on a weekly, at the very least monthly basis. And that's just, like I said, goes back to the statistics in my experience. And so I think that this is a very important topic to talk about for all those reasons. So maybe now you're like, okay, I'll bear with you a little bit longer now that you tell me that. Okay. Well, let me give you a little introduction to what I've called pornography of the heart, and the heart, this subject in relation to the heart. And what I want to start off by doing is sharing with you those statistics that I talked about. And I'm not going to by any means share with you all the statistics that I have. I've got a sheet here of nothing but statistics, and I'm only going to share with you some of these, okay? And I have footnotes with the source that they came from, the year that they were taken from research studies. Just follow along with me in these statistics. Before we do, I got ahead of myself. This is my outline for my study, so we're going to talk about these statistics in an introduction to the subject. We're going to talk about the problem of pornography. We're going to talk about the broken promises that pornography offers, and finally talk about some practical points for the subject. We've actually covered the first point, so now we're going to go to the problem of pornography. So let's talk about these statistics. I'm going to start with men. This is not just a male problem, I'll let you know. The statistics will bear that out. I find that a lot of people don't believe me when I say that. They think it's almost exclusively a male problem. You're going to be surprised with some of the statistics I share with you. Some of the stories, personal stories I'll share with you. This is not just a male problem. But first of all, the first exposure to pornography among men is 12 years old on average. And Douglas Weiss, in his book Clean, cites the average age as 11 years old. I was 9 years old when I was shown pornography by my cousin. I talked to one man who had a great struggle with this for a long time, even into his marriage. He was 5 years old when his brother showed it to him on the TV. But this is the average age, 11, 12. You'll see that consistently in findings. 1 in 5 mobile searches are for pornography. 1 in 5 youth pastors and 1 in 7 senior pastors use porn on a regular basis and are currently struggling. I've talked to many preachers who have a problem actively with pornography at the time of the conversation. According to the Sexual Recovery Institute, sex and porn are among the top 5 search terms for kids under 18. Sex is actually the #1 topic for internet searches, and more than 1.3 million porn sites will pop up at the user's request. A lot of it, you've got to pay money to get the full database, but it's ridiculous how much you can access for free. Now, that's just a short list of male statistics. Again, I got a lot more here. I just picked the ones that I thought were most interesting and compelling as to why should we talk about this. But let's talk about female statistics. 17% of women struggle with pornography addiction, according to one source. Women are 2 times more likely to use a chat room than men. It's interesting psychologically why psychologists think that is, but nonetheless, that is true. I've seen that in multiple different sources. In one survey, 41% of women surveyed, there were 241 total surveyed, said that they read romance novels that contain sexually explicit scenes. Within the 14 to 18-year-old age bracket, over half of the girls, that would be 53%, claimed they read these kind of novels. It took me a long time to realize that pornography is not just visual video images. It's all inclusive of any content that involves inciting the mind with explicit nature, sexually speaking. In one study, 82% of women in the married relationship state they struggle with depression during their relationship with their sexually addicted husband. I've gotten more emails from my website, 5-Minute Bible Study, from women who had husbands who were looking at pornography probably than I have anything else on my website. It's quite sad. And so those are just some of the statistics that I would share with you. Again, I have more of those. So that you know that this isn't just something out in the world, that this is only things that women in the world would struggle with. Unfortunately, it's not. I remember, this is probably 12 years ago, I was riding in a car with a girl my age, and her younger sister was in the back seat. And we were just talking and being silly, and I said, "So what's your favorite movie?" And some of y'all won't even recognize the name of this, hopefully. Some of y'all will. And I don't remember, she was like 11 years old, and she said, "My favorite movie is Magic Mike." And at first I kind of laughed, and I realized she wasn't kidding. She had this iPad that she was watching movies on that her parents had no clue. They had to have had no clue what she was watching. And if you don't know what that is, just let me tell you, you don't need to be seeing it. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. I had another conversation over the phone. A woman called me. She was married to a Christian. They were both Christians in another state. And she called me because she had seen I was putting out a lot of this content on this subject on my website, and she thought maybe I'd be a good person to talk to. So she told me that her husband actually, not only was he looking at pornography, yes, but that was like the least of his problems. He was in way deep in all sorts of corrupt stuff that I won't even mention. But that was one of the issues, and she was asking me, what should I do about it? So I'm trying to give her some counsel. Well, in the midst of that, she decides to tell me that she has a problem reading erotic novels. And I said, "Well, you need to be talking to somebody else than me. You don't need to be talking to me about this. Find a lady at church, find an older sister, and talk to her." And now if some woman talks to me about anything related to this, I always copy in my wife, and it's an open conversation. But nonetheless, at that time, I wasn't married, so that's what I told her to do. So she came back to me on the phone, or I can't remember, a week later, and she said, "I went to one of the older ladies at church like you told me to, and when I told her my problem, she said, 'Oh, honey, I read those too.'" I said, "Well, find another one." And I was kind of surprised. That kind of opened up my eyes. Okay, this isn't just something out in the world. These statistics are true. I'm thoroughly convinced that there is some of that going on here. It's so secret that nobody would know but the person doing it probably. but this is real stuff. It's not just a male problem. And as far as my own personal account, I'm not going to go into great depth. Some of y'all have heard me talk about it on a personal level, and some of you from the pulpit. I was 9 years old when my cousin showed me pornography on satellite TV. It started off with some magazines, but I didn't even know what I was looking at hardly. And then he continued to show me that stuff, and then I had access to my parents' dial-up internet, and so I would access it on dial-up internet, and that took a long time. You had to hope that Dad didn't get out of the shower too fast before I could delete the search history. And that continued until I was 17 years old, and my dad finally got an email, and he figured that somebody had been looking up something for him to be getting these emails. And he asked me, and I said yes. I was actually very relieved that he had found that out, because I wanted somebody to know, but I didn't have the guts to tell anybody. And from that point on, I still, like once a year, would find myself looking at pornography until I was about 21, 22. And it's been 12 years now, I think, since the last time I looked at it. And now I don't have any desire to look at it. I can say that honestly and truthfully, but I'm not. I remember what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 12, that he who thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. And so I'm very careful about what I allow to myself to watch or look at, or even social media apps, pages to follow. I don't take that stuff lightly. And so if you're somebody and you find yourself resonating with some of the stuff I'm telling you, everybody's story is a little different. In each situation, it's counseling, each situation is a little different. But if you find yourself in that situation, I hope that you'll perk up and that you'll listen. Now, what do we do about this problem? I just said each situation is different. I used to take a cookie cutter approach, and I used to tell everybody, you know what, you need to basically cut out the sources of your temptation. You need to start reading your Bible, and you need to start praying. Most people that have a problem with pornography, like most Christians, are not reading their Bible, and they don't have a steady prayer life. That's just the honest truth about most Christians, I find. Myself, at times in my life. Some Christians have a problem with pornography, and they're preachers, and they read their Bible more than anybody, and they pray more than anybody. So each situation is a little bit different. But I used to say basically that cookie cutter approach, well, you just need to start doing this. It's very straightforward. Basically just cut it off. And for some people, I do have seen, by experience, counseling them that is all they need. But a lot of times I find that's not it. Like, that's not the end all. And I'm not downplaying the necessity of being saturated in God's word and revelation, letting it speak to you. I'm not downplaying at all the necessity to have a constant communication with God in prayer. And I'm not at all downplaying cutting off the source of wherever you're getting access to this. But I'm just saying there's more to it. I think there's a heart aspect to it that I wasn't emphasizing for a long time, and I think that we need to consider. Notice this in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 22, what Paul said. We read this passage a minute ago. I want to focus on it closer. It says, flee also youthful lusts. That fits with what we're talking about, doesn't it? Youthful lusts. That's a broad category, but it would include what we're talking about. But pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. I believe with all my heart that there is something deep in our hearts that goes beyond strictly hormones and lust that fuels our desire to look at these things and this love-hate relationship that you'll find yourself having with pornography. It's amazing. You look at it and then you hate yourself for looking at it, and then you find yourself looking at it again. It's just like this endless cycle that's driven a lot by guilt and shame. But notice what he says there. He draws attention to these very broad foundational principles. Those are very broad. They're not very specific. Faith, love, peace, righteousness. Those are huge concepts, kind of that form foundations of Christian faith and thinking. And he's saying that these are the elements by which you overcome youthful lusts on the foundational level. And that tells to me that there is something more deeper to these superficial sins that we find in our life that we need to drill down to find out what they are. And so that's what I want to do for just a moment. I want to talk about four broken promises that pornography offers, and look at this from a more foundational root cause issue level. I want to read a passage real quick from Isaiah 55, which is not about this subject particularly, but it's about, it talks about here that this is common to all humans, that we have certain thirsts. We have certain desires, longings. He calls them thirsts, though, in Isaiah 55. God, the speaker, says, "Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Yes, come, buy wine and milk without money and without price." Here it is, verse 2. "Why do you spend money for what's not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what's good, and let your soul delight in abundance." God speaks to the fact that we as humans, again, have these longings in our souls, but we often go to wells without water to try to satisfy them. He says again, verse 2, "Why do you spend your wages on sources that don't satisfy?" That's what we do when we have this constant habit of going to pornography for satisfaction. We find that it never, ever satisfies. It never comes payday on its promises. It promises a lot of stuff, and yet you find yourself going habitually back to it in this insane cycle. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results, expecting it to eventually satisfy you. And you know it's not going to, but you're still in this cycle. And so we have these drives, and again, I think it's more than just hormones and our sex, our male or female. So let's get to these 4 broken promises that I mentioned before. I was reading a book earlier this year as I'm really trying to eventually write a book on this subject, and that's been a goal of mine for a couple years, and things keep getting in the way. So this is the year of research and learning more. On the first book I read this year was probably the best book I've read in a few years. And in that book, there was just one little section, and he shared really 6 broken promises of pornography. I only share with you tonight 4, because a couple of them I thought were kind of repetitive. But I want to share these with you from Michael Cusick, and I think that these are really good. I'll just start off with number 1, and I'll have a comment about each one as we go. He says that pornography promises validation of our manhood without requiring strength. And let me explain what that means. Many men feel like they don't have anything to offer a real woman. And sometimes it's the guy coming through the front door that has all the confidence, and he's got the chiseled body, and you think, this guy's got it going. But if you really knew inside of his head, he doesn't have the real confidence of asking a girl out, or really feeling like a real man. Pornography offers that promise of being a real man by offering you things that supposedly only real men can enjoy, but it doesn't really fulfill that promise. Many men feel insecure because they're overweight, they're losing their hair, fill in the blank of the rest of whatever things men go through in the aging process, and they become very insecure about that. It's amazing. Some of the guys that you see that look very confident on the outside are pretty insecure. If you're an intuitive person, you'll pick up on those things, but they're very insecure, and so they go to pornography because they don't have the security to interact with a real woman, sometimes their own wife. Number 2, pornography promises sexual fulfillment without relationship. Notice it says it promises sexual fulfillment. It never actually gives that, but that's the promise. Relationships can be very, very difficult. If you've never been in one, let me tell you, they can be very difficult. We've talked about just recently in the Song of Solomon how they can be really fun and amazing, and that's why God gave us marriage, because it's great. It's not some just drab thing, but it can be. And if you find yourself having difficulty in your relationships, married or not, with porn, you're promised sexual fulfillment without having to deal with all that baggage of a relationship. It promises all of the things of a relationship without one. Of course, we know after you've experienced, it's not, but it promises those things. Number 3, porn promises intimacy without requiring risk and suffering. I think I got ahead of myself earlier, but what I said earlier about not being able to ask a real woman on a date. You're afraid of taking that risk. Well, with porn, never shoots you down. It'll never make you feel bad, at least by calling you ugly or stupid or I don't want to go on another date. It always asks you on another date. If it can be really difficult to open up to a friend or a spouse and be emotionally intimate, to be vulnerable with them. But pornography is always willing to listen. If you want to think, that's what it kind of promises. And number 4, porn promises passion in life without connection to your soul. What do I mean by that? Listen to this quote from Cusick. He says, "For many men, porn is the high point of their days. It offers a reliable way to feel passion in life, even if for a moment." And that's true. When you're in this state, in the depth of this lust, you can be so depressed that is really the only passion you feel in life. There's no joy. There's no satisfaction in life because all you have is this guilt and shame for what you're doing, and you get a moments of release whenever you go back to this habit. When I think back to when I struggled with pornography when I was especially 12 through 17, I think for me, a lot of it had to do with number 1 and number 3. I was very insecure. A lot of people thought that I was more secure than I was. I had a lot of hesitation asking a girl on a date. I finally drummed up enough courage one day to ask Carissa to go on a date with me. By that point, I think I had moved on a little bit. I had made some progress, but back then, you couldn't get me to hardly talk to a girl and tell her that I really liked her. But more than anything, I was lonely. And I was extremely lonely. And especially in those times when there was nobody else home, that was a very vulnerable time for me. And that's true for many men, I think, many individuals, period. If it's late at night, there's nobody to hang out with, you're just by yourself, and it can be quite depressing and drive you to do something that you really shouldn't and ultimately don't want to do, but you do. But I believe that there's some fear, some longing that's deep inside of us that's driving us to do this more times than not. Sometimes it may just be because you're a man and you've got a drive and the opportunity's there. That may be it. But for a lot of men, I think there's something that probably compels them beyond just that. Well, regardless, this is just a little bit of something to think about if you're somebody struggling with this, if you're talking with somebody and helping them through this. But let's go on to some practical pointers for somebody that's struggling with pornography. And this will be our last major point. And so I want to leave you with 3 tips. One of them has 3 subpoints, so maybe you could say 6 tips. But I want to leave you with 3 tips that will hopefully help you to engage with overcoming this by the help of God. The first thing I would tell you is to be urgent. I find that in my own experience, even with the sin, a lot of times you can find yourself thinking, well, I just need to read another book, and maybe I'll inform myself a little bit more. Maybe I just will find the secret in this book. And instead of talking to somebody, instead of actually talking to somebody and opening up. And you read that book and you're like, well, it was good, but it didn't really give me the secret. But this other book's supposed to be really good, and so maybe that one has the secret. And when you realize you've read enough books and they're not any of them by themselves helping you until you actually put them into practice, be urgent about it and stop wasting time. You can read all the books in the world, but you really need somebody to connect with on an emotional level that can hear you, that can listen to you, that can guide you. And sometimes you need somebody to tell you the most obvious stuff that's so simple because you're so stupid, because you won't listen to what's right in front of you. You need somebody to tell you the plain, honest truth. And when they tell you, it's like, yeah, that's so simple. Why didn't I think of that? Because you're just insane. There's literally a mental aspect to it that you become insane depending on how entrenched you are in this sin. And these are all lies from the devil that, you can defeat this on your own. But the Bible says in Isaiah 55, verse 6, to seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he's near. Be urgent. If you have that seed that it's time to talk to somebody. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 12 says, beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief and departing from the living God, but exhort one another daily while it's still today, lest in any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. He's encouraging them to act today while there's still today. Because you don't know if there's going to be tomorrow, but while it's still today, you have a chance. Talk to somebody before the deceitfulness of sin hardens you more and more and more. And the more time that your conscience is sensitive and it's actually talking to you and you keep shutting it down, that's how your heart gets hardened over and over to the point of it's not sensitive at all. It doesn't even respond anymore. Act today. So that's the first thing, is to be urgent. And that's really nothing amazing there. But we've got to understand that. Number two, I would say to perform a spiritual assessment of yourself. Sometimes it helps to have somebody to do this with you, to kind of guide you and state things out loud that maybe you just can't put in words. What are the underlying reasons why I keep going back to pornography? Well, again, sometimes it is something as simple as I'm a dude and I've got hormones, and somebody, showed me this picture one time and it just opened up floodgates. But a lot of times, I went through all those points before. Is it just because I'm a man, or is it because I'm lonely, I'm insecure, I'm afraid to take risks in my relationship and afraid to be vulnerable with my spouse or my friend or my parents? Or is it because I'm spiritually empty inside? I don't have any true intimacy with God because it's so full, my heart's so full of lust that doesn't have room for God. I find some of the most spiritually empty people are the people that have a struggle with lust, because there's no room for anything of worth and value. So perform a spiritual assessment, and if you want to know more about that, let's talk one-on-one. But that's just my point number two. And point number three is to get strong abs. Now, that's not talking about these. You don't need these to overcome pornography, but you do need what those three letters represent: accountability, boundaries, and spiritual formation. That's not original to me. I wish I could take credit for that. But you need strong abs. You need to understand what those are, and you need all three of these things. I find that I talk to some men, and I've talked to a lot of men who come to me and ask me for help in this, and I find out that they think that one of these is enough. And I'll explain what these represent in just a moment. They'll think that maybe two of them are enough. But I'm telling you, unless you have all three of these in your life, accountability, boundaries, and spiritual formation, you will not be pure in heart. You might actually, cut off the actual sin of pornography even, but you will not be pure of heart. Let me explain what these are and explain why I'm saying this. Accountability is the act of giving an account to somebody else on a persistent basis, being responsible to somebody outside of yourself. Now, we think to ourselves we're independent, and we think, well, I'm only accountable to God. And you are, in one sense, but when you read the New Testament closely and the passages in Acts and the epistles, we are not really just accountable to God, we're accountable to our brothers and sisters. Paul says to bear each other's burdens in Galatians 6 and verse 2. Well, you can't bear each other's burdens unless you share your burdens with your brethren and they share their burdens with you. And you exhort one another daily while it's still today. You got to know what to exhort each other about. There's accountability to each other. I just don't get it when I hear some people say, oftentimes third hand, that stop messing with my life, stop getting in my life, stop getting in my business. And it's basically because somebody corrected them and tried to help them and guide them, and they don't want that because they don't think they're accountable to anybody. But we're accountable to God, and we're accountable to our brothers and sisters, and if you want to overcome this sin, it's such a deep sin personally that you need somebody to hold you accountable, put your feet to the fire, check up on you. Now, I could go into accountability for a long time. We could just talk about that, but we don't have time for that. I think the benefit would be just to stay short and keep it at that. Find somebody that you trust, that you can really be completely honest with, you can open up to, and that you know is going to hold you accountable. Too many times, men will go to somebody that they just simply think one conversation of opening up is going to fix the problem. That's not accountability. One conversation to bear it all, that's a moment of accountability, but you need that persistence. And it's got to be strong on both ends. Okay, the second one is about boundaries. Boundaries, fences are put up around your property to keep things out, sometimes to keep certain things in. In this case, you're keeping something out. You're keeping video that you shouldn't be seeing, images, ads that come on your phone or whatever. So you're keeping that stuff out. I've told so many people before, men that continue to persist with pornography, and I'll check in on them. I'll say, hey, how you doing? And they looked at it again, and so I say, okay, well, let's get back on the horse, and we, encourage them. And then a week later, they looked at it again, and I tell them, okay, get back on the horse. And each time I'm encouraging them to do the things that I told them to do the first time, but they still haven't implemented. These boundaries of like, you need some accountability software on your phone. Ultimately, if you need to delete all your social media on your phone, that's what you got to do. Sometimes you got to go dumb phone. You can't go smartphone. Some people, they have codes on their phone, and a friend has the code if they want to look up a new website. They have like maybe 3 websites they can look up. Outside of that, they got to have a code for it, and they got to get permission. Some people have their softwares that literally will take random screenshots of your phone throughout the day and send it to your accountability person by email, and you don't know when the screenshots are being taken. I've had that happen. And they're blurred out, so the accountability person can't really see exactly what it is, but they get the idea. And it tells them, hey, you might want to check on your buddy. There's all sorts of boundaries, and that's just your phone. Other things are like, don't allow yourself into your bedroom with any digital device after 9 o'clock, because that's when I've decided that's when I always have the temptation. Whatever that is, you need to put in boundaries, and that could look like a number of things. But I'll stick with this, and then we'll move on to the third one. James Clear says in his book on atomic habits, which I know some of our brethren are reading, it's a good book. He says if you want to break a bad habit, you need to make the thing that you don't want to do invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, and make it unsatisfying. I know one man, he has a podcast, and he shares each episode is something about this subject, and he said he made a particular boundary in his life that every time that he looked at something he shouldn't have, he would make himself go take a cold shower. And if you've ever done a cold plunge, like Chance, I've gone over to his house and done a cold plunge, and that's pretty rough to just put yourself in like 34-degree water. But then I found out that taking a cold shower is worse because the water's shifting and you just never have like complete solace in the water. It's terrible. It's worse than a cold plunge. And he would make himself take a cold shower every time he did this, and that was to make it unsatisfying, the thing that he had done. That was his boundary, one of them. So those are some things to consider. And again, if you want to know more about these things, we could certainly talk personally, but these are just a short clip. And then finally, spiritual formation. And this is the one that really every Christian needs this. It's unfortunate how few of us actually engage in fortifying our spirit with the Word of God, with prayer, with meditation, with all the spiritual disciplines. There's 10 of them. Notice Ephesians chapter 4, verse 22, what it says. That you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. In Psalm 119, verse 9, the psalmist says, how can a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed according to your word. Well, that's a straightforward answer. And again, it's not saying that's the end all, but that's a very primary feature. The only thing better than spiritual formation by itself is spiritual formation in a community of brothers, or if you're a sister, with sisters. That community aspect is so powerful, and it's something that I would add to all that. So strong abs, accountability, boundaries, and spiritual formation. Starving the flesh, the last point, and feeding the spirit. You got to replace what you're cutting out, because what a lot of times people do, they cut out the source of their only source of passion each day, and then they have zero passion. Eventually that'll drive you to want to kill yourself. You've got to have something in your life that gives you satisfaction, and it needs to be from a good source. That's what we need. Be urgent, perform a spiritual assessment, and get strong abs. That's my 3 points for you tonight. I want to end on a passage that I read before. This is the third time we'll have read it. It goes back to what I said, that I believe that with all my heart, there's something deep inside of us that goes beyond strictly our hormones and our lust, that fuels our love-hate relationship with pornography and other sins. I think that's reiterated by Paul when he says, flee youthful lust, pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. If you want to be pure, then do all the things I'm telling you, trusting in God. If you want to be porn-free, well, there's a lot of secular psychologists that could probably, maybe, help you get there. But if you want to be pure in heart, then consider all of that together. And that's my word to you. If you're somebody tonight that, I've made a rule. If you're below the age of 18, I've told young men this before, and you need somebody to talk to, I am more than happy for you to talk to me. But I'm telling you, I'm going to tell your parents. So what I always give the option is you can talk to me, and I'll be happy to sit down with you and help you tell your parents, because you're not even 18 yet, and I don't have the right to override their authority in your life. If you're somebody that's over 18, I will not tell your parents. Unless something tragic happens that I've got to tell the leaders of the church and your parents something really, really, really bad. This is just between me and you. And if you're married, I will help you tell your spouse. I'm not going to keep it a secret from your spouse either. Your spouse has every right to know. A lot of times that window, the first few days of that are very difficult. I know from experiencing helping men through this. But afterward, every time I've ever witnessed it, and I've witnessed it on multiple occasions, they always say it's the best thing they ever did. And their marriage was stronger than it ever was after it, even though it was very difficult at first, because for a wife, that's very crushing, understandably. But it's something very important that really is holding back the intimacy that we enjoy in marriage, true intimacy. Well, if you're somebody that needs to talk to somebody, then consider these things and consider not only you can get a hold of me, but I'm going to share with you a couple of resources. One is this book. If you're a parent, I've not read all this book yet, but I've read enough of it to know that it's a really good book. And I had a couple of parents ask me about how to talk about this subject with their children. And this book is really good, More Than Just the Talk by Jonathan McKee. And if you're a parent, I would just recommend you need to get that and you need to read it. It's like 200 pages. There's audiobook versions of it. You need to listen to that. It's really good. And if you want to know more about this subject, I wrote a newsletter back in 2024 called The Truth About Porn. Most people are probably not going to hold up their phone and scan that, because then that's going to be like, I don't want people to think that I have a problem. I'm really looking this up for a buddy. You can find that at 5minutebiblestudy.com. 5minutebiblestudy.com. You'll find it under books, the whole newsletter, and that's eventually what I'm turning into a book and will publish later, hopefully in the next couple of years. That's my sermon tonight. And if there's anybody that needs to obey the gospel, then this, being urgent about this, like I said, talking to somebody on this subject, you should have the same urgency with this that you would have with obeying the gospel. When you know that you're lost and you need salvation, there's no better time than today. Act today while it's still today. If you've sinned and you need forgiveness, you need prayer, you need community, then this is your opportunity to get that as well. We're going to sing a song. Let me know while we stand and sing.
This is your wake-up call to come and serve the Lord. Casting the world aside, come in and worship.
Welcome to the Chapel Grove Church of Christ. My name is Aaron Battey. I've been a member here for several years now, and I just wanted to introduce you to our church, what it's all about. We've been here since the early 1930s, which is really a long time for a church to be around. And I don't think that happens by accident. But to tell you more about what our church is about and why it's such a great place to be a part of the family, let's just hear it straight from our members.
The most important thing to me about a church is that they're dedicated to God and that they get their truth from the Bible, which Chapel Grove definitely has.
Because of the people here. It's a church family that I think is like none other.
Because you can feel a real connection and genuine love between its members.
Because of all the family.
I like playing with my friends at Chapel Grove because my friends on it and singing.
It's Bible-based, and you have a lot of people here who care about you greatly.
The fact that all the elders and evangelists and each member really, the amount of effort that they put into making sure everything that you hear preached from the pulpit is backed by Scripture.
Because it has been very supportive of me over the 27 years I've been here.
Because it's such a great place to raise our family. We love our friends here.
Because of the family atmosphere we have here and the strength and encouragement that we get to follow God.
I was completely welcomed into Chapel Grove with open arms, and I was treated like a family member and immediately invited to Bible studies, over to people's houses for supper.
It's not an immediate rush once the services are over for everybody to leave and go their separate ways all week long.
With that said, we want to invite you to come visit us sometime in person. Every Sunday morning we worship at 10 a.m. where we partake of the Lord's Supper. We have teaching, prayer, and a cappella singing. In the afternoon, it's at 5 p.m. on Sundays. Every third Sunday is at 2 p.m., and we'll stick around and have lunch together on the grounds. Wednesday nights are at 7 p.m., so come check us out at any time. You can find our contact if you have more questions at our website at chapelgrovechurch.com.
Open your heart and mind to share the living word. Come and worship, worship the King. Gather together now, we come to serve you, Lord. Laying our burdens down, we come to worship.